Well, welcome. My name is Greg Martin, and my company is Redtail Guitars. And this is my space, and we're going to show you around a little bit. Well, I've been a woodworker ever since I was about 13 years old, working with my dad, who was a master shipwright. And so I've been in the wood shop ever since then, working with him and with our carpentry and cabinet maker and boat building business. For quite a few years, we did furniture and cabinetry for the yachting industry, for luxury yachts. And when my son decided that he wanted to play guitar, he asked me if I could make one. And realistically, I didn't know if I could or not. I went to our library and checked out as many books as we could on string instrument making, and used those as guides. And then we went to a pawn shop and we bought an old Hondo guitar, and we tore it apart. And I learned how a truss rod works and how electronics are put together. And that was kind of the beginning. And that took over a year before we even started planning a guitar shape. And when I felt confident, then I dove in, and this was pre-internet. It was like 92, and so there wasn't a whole lot of online, or there was no online helps. I befriended a guitar repair fella in my town in Tustin, California, and he put up with me for quite a few months. And finally told me, he says, just, you've got all the machines, you've got knowledge, just go do it. And so that's how we started with our first guitar. And I just have always loved guitar music. And I decided that I was going to kind of build in the Gibson style with a set neck. And it just kind of went from there. The name Redtail came way later because I didn't get into guitar making really to have a production line. I got into guitar making because I enjoyed it and I wanted to learn how to do it. And so every guitar I made, I did something that I hadn't done before. I did dot inlays, and then I did block inlays, and then I did binding and purfling, and went on to that. And that's my education, was just diving in and getting it done. Yeah, I started because Andy wanted a guitar. He wasn't into piano, so he wanted to play guitar. So we were down at the shop one day, and he said, "Dad, can you cut me out a guitar shape to do air guitar?" And I said, "Okay." So we cut out his shape that he wanted, and painted it black and glued some kite strings on it. That was when he was pretty young. And he would lock himself in his room and turn the radio up, and listen to Led Zeppelin, and he'd play air guitar for a while. And then he came back to me and says, "Dad, I think I want a real guitar." And so we went from there. I bought him a used 82 or 84 Ibanez Destroyer, and we still have that. He's got that, and that was the guitar that he mainly learned on. And after that was when we made Brownie, the first Redtail guitar. And the Redtail name came because I'm just fascinated with red-tail hawks. And I just think they're a beautiful bird, and I thought, well, what better way to do it than to just call it Redtail guitar. And my logo originally was some kind of a bird. It wasn't really a hawk. I wasn't very good at pearl inlay, so it was a very basic bird shape. In fact, we don't even call it a hawk; we call it a bird. And but that's how that all started. So Andy, my son, wanted me to make him this guitar, and we made it out of a chunk of walnut burl that I was going to make a chair out of. And the first neck was a piece of teak that I had left over from my boat building business. And we put that together, and that became Brownie. You know, the walnut itself is over 100 years old, and I had it way before Andy was born. Now, Andy is, of course, Andy Martin, originally from Pro Guitar Shop, and then Reverb, and also now Andy Demos on YouTube. And he's got about 2,500 demos that he's done from 2007 to date.
For this first installment, I thought I'd share something with you that's dear to me. It's the first guitar I learned to play on, and it's the first guitar my dad created back in 1992. Since then, my dad, Greg Martin, has built a dozen guitars over 18 years, which he's branded Redtail guitars. So this is Brownie, named for obvious reasons.
Well, I was surprised that he put it on in a video, and I thought that was very cool, sort of a thank you, Dad. And he's still got that guitar. It still plays wonderfully. We've changed not only the neck on that once, but we've put in a number of different pickups, and we've kind of stuck with the DiMarzio Super Distortions from the 70s. In fact, for a while there, I kind of collected Super Distortions just to try to find one that was better than the last one. And we changed the bridge and the tailpiece around. So there's walnut plugs in the body where different offsets occurred. But that was my first one. First Redtail guitar was Brownie. I think that was 1992. One of the most important machines in this space is my pin router. This is an older Shop Fox pin router. And then this last year I came up with this jig for my Beetle Kill guitars. I had 9 necks that I needed to do, so I wanted to try to get some type of production setup. So we start with a neck blank, and then by the time it gets to this point, truss rod. By the time it gets to this point with the headstock veneers and graphite rods inserted and the basic mortise done, I needed a way to make a nice round over on the back to start with. It's not the finished round over. I do that all by hand. So what I did was I made a jig that can be used with a 7/8 round over bit, and there's a little block that goes in here, and then there's a screw that goes in here. That honker there is 7/8 radius, and that goes in the pin router here and is suspended at a particular point over the neck, and it gives me a rough radius to start. A pretty important task. It saves a lot of handwork. It makes each neck similar to the one previous, so you have some repeatability, and it's quicker than doing them by hand for sure. So I like to build jigs, even if I'm only going to do one of something. I'd rather spend the time and engineer it so that I knew that when I was getting ready to do the part, it would be right, and instead of just doing it by the seat of my pants. The older you get, the slower you get. I think we tallied up 25 guitars in about 25 years. Like I said, I didn't get into guitar making to sell them. I have sold a few, until I got into the Beetle Kill project, where I made 9 out of one log that I had purchased. And those are for sale. I've sold a few of them, and I have 3 left that are about halfway done. So if you want one, contact me. The Beetle Kill project started when I noticed the western slope of Colorado devastated by the beetle, and the pine that was down or standing dead. And at that time in 2010, there really wasn't an industry created for beetle kill pine. And I thought, well, maybe I could do my bit and repurpose some of it. So I bought a log in 2010 and had it quarter sawn. And I did it quarter sawn because pine is really so soft that it doesn't really have a bell tone to it. Leo Fender used pine, but he went away from it to alder and then ash. But by quarter sawing it, your grain runs vertically, and just like it would with Sitka spruce or quarter sawn cedars, it creates a little harder surface and a much better tap tone, much better bell tone. Coming into here, I have an old 4-inch jointer. It's a home light jointer, probably a Sears from the 50s. And I bought it from an old gentleman who actually made violins in California. And I've never had to do anything to it except change the blades out. And I use this to true up neck blanks, fingerboards, body halves where they're joined together. And it's on casters, like the pin router is on casters. And this is kind of interesting. I don't think I can get it down, but this contraption here, I put my fingerboard blank on the center, hold it down with masking tape and super glue, and then in this router is a ball bottom router, and I slide this back and forth this way, and then the table goes across the arch this way and creates a 12-inch radius on my fingerboards. And I do this after I slot them, and then I go back afterwards and true up the radius on the fingerboard with another little block, and then go back over the slots with a little saw. So that comes out every once in a while. I try to do these in, like maybe 5 or 6 at a time. Fingerboard was the hardest to begin with. My very first fingerboard was done with a kitchen Ginsu knife, because I didn't have a very thin kerf blade to do the slots. And that was before the internet and probably before I knew about StuMac. And so locally, there wasn't anybody who had any little 24 thousandths saw blades. So I went to the kitchen and got the Ginsu knife, and I slotted all of the slots with that. And that was my very first neck, and it didn't go well. The neck was on, it was a bolt-on guitar that Andy's had ever since the beginning. It's a walnut bodied guitar that we call Brownie. And that was back in about 1992. And the neck that I had on it originally was all laid out with a divider from fret to fret. And it's hard to keep everything perfectly spaced according to what they call the rule of 18. And you have your number of frets and you have your scale length, and then you take your divider and you mark the first fret, and then you go down a certain distance, you mark the second fret, and all with pencil, and then you go back and you saw it across. So anyway, that was a learning experience, and after we had it on the guitar for only a few weeks, Andy said, you know, there's something wrong. So these things are sharp or these things are flat. And also he says, it just doesn't feel right in my hand. So I said, all right, we're going to make another one. So I made the neck that's on it now, which is a 3-piece neck. And that's been on there ever since. And I used Stu Max fret gauges and fret saw setup that they had at the time to do that, and it came out perfect. This station here I created because I was running out of room. This is a fairly new sander to me, and I had it on a stand like all my other ones, and I just didn't have space to have a stand for everything. So I created this station here, which allows me to have this combo sander. It's an oscillating spindle sander, and it also has a vertical belt sander that you can change out. So I have a fixture that goes up, mounts onto this, and it's about 1/2 inch from the edge of the plywood to the edge of the disc sander. And as I run it through, I take light passes all the way through, and then it creates my radius for my volute. And then I'll take it back out and I'll move it in just a little bit, maybe a 30-second, and then I'll come back and I'll do the same thing again. And that way I get a nice, even, true surface, and it's thick enough to where then I can put whatever headstock veneers on that I'm going to. My other little sander is one that probably every wood shop in America has, and it's a 4x36 belt sander, and it tilts up vertical as well, and it's got a little 8-inch or 6-inch disc on it. And I can true up nuts or small pieces of trim with this. It's very, very useful. Then my tool wall is my newest and I think the greatest improvement in the shop. I watched YouTube videos for years, people showing their tool walls and all the cool stuff they had hanging there. And I had drawers for all of these things, but then I was always having to get up, across the room, grab it, come back. I wanted to have all my primary tools that I use on a day-to-day basis at arm's reach. And magnets work out really great. And then that freed up the drawers for secondary use tools. And so it was much more convenient and a better use of space for sure. My router sled that I'm fine tuning right now, and this will be where I can take a body blank after it's been glued up, and I can take and flatten it and turn it over and go down to, like, say, 1 3/4. And so how this works is these are linear bearings that ride on this rail, and then you have like an X and Y axis. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could run both at the same time, you know, or you could put a stop on this thing for absolutely parallel cuts, possibly for truss rod slots. There's all kinds of things you can do with this. And like I said, I like to do things in batches. So once I get this thing tuned up, and it's almost ready to roll, I'll do those in batches. Also, it becomes a workstation for clamping the body to the vise for maybe doing fret work. I got this idea from StuMac, of course. They do all the research, and then I steal all the ideas. And I made it my own, though. So you have your vise here, your neck goes in here, and your body is here, and then you could actually sit, and with your tools here, you're not setting them on top of the guitar body, or you're not reaching across the guitar to grab a tool and then possibly dropping it onto your nicely finished guitar. So I use this a lot, and I lowered it from this height so I could be seated, and then if I want to get around the other side, I can pull it out, and so I could do both sides without having to change the position of the guitar. Then, oh, you gotta get this. Andy had that saw lasered Redtail guitars many years ago, and I never had a spot for it. So like I said, wall space is a premium, so I had to use that. Then I made a companion cabinet to this one this last year, and it holds all my chisels, easily accessed, sort of a miscellaneous drawer, drawing and layout tools, French curves, anything that I would use to make a full-scale drawing.
You got an Andy Demos.
Oh, the Andy Demo sign. Yeah, that was my first attempt at resining over wood, and it's kind of a neat story with that, because the trim ring for that comes out of a Fender Showman 15-inch cabinet. It's their tone ring, and a guy from Fender gave that to me back in the 90s because I was going to build a Showman cabinet, and it's just hung around, and I made that Andy Demo sign. I thought maybe he could use it in his office, but the epoxy bubbled around the edges, and so I didn't want to use it. So I have it hung there. That pattern, Roman, behind the hose, the white one, that's the first pattern for Brownie. It goes back to 1992. And back in 92, no internet. The only way that you could build a Les Paul style guitar is if you traced one or had one. And I actually just looked at a picture in one of the guitar magazines and then adapted it to the size of material and the shape that I wanted. And this drawing is one of two. This drawing here is what I'm calling the PDXT, which is an offset Telecaster style body. The red line is the outline that we're going with, and it's going to be dual humbuckers. It's going to have 2 tones and a volume and a 3-way switch up here, and then I'm doing a real cool access joint here to get up into the higher frets. And then I redesigned my Redtail headstock, made it a little shorter and a little wider, and that's the basis for the PDXT. And that one is going to be semi-hollow I've got some really cool redwood for the top and the back, and then the core is going to be white ash. It's all going to be natural finish. I think the fingerboard's probably going to be rosewood, and the cavity cover and the headstock veneer is going to be a kind of a spalted ash, so everything will kind of tie together. That'll be a fun project. Well, finishing in a small shop is really difficult. You know, I'm in a residential area, I'm not in a commercial area, so I have to pick my days. You know, here in Colorado you have dry and windy in the summer, and then you have snow in the winter. So spraying outside is not good. And up until now, I've always sprayed nitro lacquer, you know, right from the very beginning, from 90s on up, always lacquer. And I have all of the aniline dyes and everything that goes with it, spray rig. But I don't want to piss off the neighbors, and more importantly, the fumes come upstairs and gets into my wife's office, and she doesn't like that. So we're going to switch over to probably crystal lac waterborne finishes on the next ones. Crystal waterborne is so helpful in answering all the questions, and they'll set me up with what I need. I can use my same spray rigs. I can add colorants, whether it's aniline dyes or universal tints, in there, just like I did with nitro lacquer, and I think I'll be okay. And then I'll be able to spray in here, probably just take a plastic sheet and cordon off an area just to catch the overspray. And we'll see how that goes. It should be good. My website is redtailguitars.com, and there's a contact page that links to my Gmail, which is redtailguitarshop@gmail.com. And, you know, if you want to talk, we can talk about what you want in a guitar. Yeah, future projects, I do have a couple. Probably it'll be for 2023 and going forward. I'm designing a downscaled ES 175 arch top. It's going to be a 15-inch body instead of a 16 or a 17 like an L5. And that's exciting because I love getting the chisels out and hand carving the spruce tops. And then probably probably sooner than the arch top would be the PDXT that I'm designing with Andy. It's a tele modified shape with an offset, and it's going to be a set neck. The neck will have easy access. It'll be carved so that you can get right up to the 22nd fret easily.
Awesome.
And that's about it. You know, that's about all I have going right now. And I want to thank Roman a whole lot. We tried before COVID to get together and do this, and he's an awesome guy, and he's going to be having some pedals here in the future, and the Daily Driver is an awesome pedal as well, so you ought to check it out. Thanks, Roman.